video in regards to fear. And one of the things I was talking about was how when rates start to drop, it starts getting easier for buyers to then purchase a property. So hi, this is Andy Nathan. I'm with Creative Smart Contractors. I am a licensed general contractor in Chicago and a licensed realtor, also an investor. So talking about some stuff that's near and dear to my heart, talking about the price of a property. Before I dive into this, by the way, I'm waiting right now for a roofing estimate, waiting to, some other guys are coming over there to meet, so I figured I'd shoot this video. Wanted to talk a little bit about price. So we're gonna do a deep dive. I'm kind of midway about this, but basically what I'm thinking here is that there's some good things and there's some bad things about price. First of all, let's differentiate the idea of price for rentals versus sales. Now, over the last 4 years, there's been about an average in Chicago, about 22%, give or take, increase in rents. So if prices do go down in terms of sales, unless you have a large event, kind of like COVID or the Great Recession 2008, you're probably not going to see a drop in rental prices because it's just not going to happen, because there's too many investors who cannot support those price drops. So divorce the idea of rental prices from sales prices, because those two are not the same thing. Now, what will happen if we do increase prices for sales? Let's dive into that. If we start to increase sales by reducing prices, let's say we reduce prices by 1%, just 1%. Generally what that happens is you have a 2 to 3% uptick in demand. Now, my first reaction, this is something that I wanted to double check, because I had to say, hey, my first reaction as someone who studied economics is supply and demand. So if you have a 2 to 3% increase in demand and you have 1% drop in the price, well, won't that kind of tip the balances again? Because I know, especially in Chicago, we have a very delicate ecosystem. So I wanted to know if that would happen. Now, one of the things I found interesting, and getting a little nerdy here, but it doesn't immediately impact it. So think of it this way. So you have a 1% drop in the price. What happens? Well, you have a few different phases that will happen in the price stage. So the first phase is that you drop the price and you get a few people who are ready to buy, they buy. But you don't see a gigantic increase in the number of people buying because the price dropped. What happens is that as you're looking at the price decreases in real estate, you're going to see prices generally start to go down. Now, the second phase is where, people who are thinking about this and sitting on the sideline, they'll jump in because, hey, you have a 1% decrease in price. Now, all of a sudden, you might see a 2 to 3% increase in demand again. And what's going to happen is that's going to then start to push and roll down. It's like rolling down the hill. First you go slowly down the hill, it starts to pick up speed, and then all of a sudden, what happens if the rates drop because the prices drop? Because they want to make sure that you don't have too much deflation as well. And that's when you start seeing more demand. Now in Chicago, for example, because we are very balanced between buyers and sellers in the real estate market, you're going to see a lot of challenges there because you don't have a lot of leeway there between sellers and buyers. So if you do see a 5% or 10% drop, which I don't know if that's even gonna be possible, because the reality is if you see a 10% drop, about 1 in 10 owners, Chicago homeowners, don't have enough equity to actually sustain a sale. There'll be negative equity, a short sale, which is something that happens every once in a while. And that's not just something that we could do necessarily. And this is kind of why I said initially when I was talking about what happens if prices drop. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? And the reality is that we don't know. We don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. And by the way, I see people saying hi, so I'm saying hi back. I'm gonna try and go forward with this. So if I don't respond to you right away, I'm not ignoring you. But if we start to see a 10% drop in home prices and 10% of Chicago homeowners can't even sustain it because it's negative equity. What I mean by negative equity is their mortgage is worth more than their house. Well, a lot of those people are going to try and wait it out. So unless you're in a foreclosure scenario, which is rare, you're not going to be as willing to do that. And by the way, foreclosures are probably about 1 out of 800 to 1,000 out of every homeowners go into foreclosures. And when you have stuff even the Great Crash, it wasn't 1 out of every 20 people. It's 1 out of every 100, 200 people. So you don't see like that level with the drop right away. So keep in mind, do we think we're going to be instant drops in the market? Well, if we do see a drop in the market, one of the other things to keep in mind is we might start seeing more cash buyers. So now the average price in Chicago, I think, is about 408,000 right now. If you see a 1% drop, not going to see a lot of cash buyers for a $400,000 house. But one of the things to consider is what neighborhood are people buying in. So if they're buying up in Logan Square, where the price might be 1.5, or West Loop, where it's who knows, you're not going to be seeing a lot of cash buyers. What you will see, however, is if you go into Auburn Gresham, if you go into Inglewood, if you go into back of the yards, that's when you start seeing a lot of the cash buyers, and they're going to be more active. So right now, cash buyers make up about 20 to 25% of all buyers in the Chicagoland market. If we drop prices, what we might see is expect that you might see 40% being cash buyers. Now here's the challenging part of this also. The lower side of the market's going to have more problems. Why? Well, lenders will not lend to them under a certain amount. So lenders, depending upon lender requirements, and this varies tremendously between lenders. So some of them have different things. And by the way, keep in mind, I used to be a licensed loan officer. I am not a licensed loan officer. Go talk to your lender about all the details of this. This is the video, by the way, 100% educational purposes. Do not treat this as a full analysis. These are my disclosures as I go into this. But if you take a look at the lenders, most lenders will have varying degrees of minimum loan amounts, anywhere between 50 to 125,000. I know we've run into this problem, by the way, as real estate investors. Now, one of the things that helps is that when we buy a property, sometimes we're buying properties for $30,000, $50,000. If we buy a property for $30,000, $50,000, we're below what the minimum lender amount is. Now, when we go through it, it's actually helpful because of the fact that we'll check out what's hi, as I said to you guys before. If I'm not responding right away, I'm just trying to finish my thought. So not trying to ignore you. I will get back to you. With that said, I hope your day was good also, brother. With that said, wanted to let you know that there's a lot of stuff going on in terms of the market at the lower end that's going to struggle because, as an investor, if I buy a $30,000 property, it needs $50,000 in work, that might be too little of a deal. Now, we're not seeing it right now, but if the prices do drop, I might start seeing stuff where the lender won't even give loans on it, which means you're going to see a lot of struggle, which might start to reset the balance even in a weirder spot. So that's kind of where we're at. By the way, does anyone have any questions? I just want to see, I've been talking a little bit. I want to make sure I'm not just babbling with no intent. I want to make sure I'm helping to address people's questions. For at the beginning, my name's Andy Nathan. I'm with Creative Smart Contractors. One other thought I just want to mention here as we're talking about all these things about what the price is, how it works. One of the things you have to keep in mind is Chicago is very balanced compared to a lot of parts of the country. Like if you go to Miami right now, you're probably seeing a lot of properties up for sale because they overbuilt and they have a lot of struggles there. But if you're going into Chicago, you're seeing a lot of middle ground because we do have some projects going on. Like there's like that 77, the Foundry, whatever it is. I don't remember all the names for them, but so they are creating new stuff coming in the next few years, but we don't have that significant boost in terms of properties. Like we don't have more land to do that. We don't have all the buildings. A lot of our buildings have been built. So a lot of stuff that happens now is more rehab. Now there is some new development as well. So I don't want to just neglect that, but we don't see the same level of new development as you would see in a Miami or maybe even a Phoenix or all those nice warm places like Houston. By the way, it's a nice 10, 15 degrees out here in Chicago. So enjoy your warm weather if you're listening in from a warm weather state. But one of the things that's kind of interesting is that right now we have about a 2.5 month supply of properties because it's a balanced market. So that means if you list a property today, there's a good chance that property is going to be sold by roughly, it's going to be under contract by February and probably be sold by March. That's kind of awesome, the fact that you're able to turn it around that fast. Now, if we start lowering prices, going to that idea here, what if we lower prices by 5%? Well, I said to you 5%, increases demand by 2 to 3%. What will then happen is by the time we get into the summer, by the way, if we do a 5% drop now, just giving you a random number out here, by the time we get to the summer, you're talking about maybe a 10 to 15% increase in the number of, a 10 to 15% increase in the number of buyers, which kind of ironically enough would probably increase the prices at that point, because then you start bidding wars. Because we're at 2.5 months, if you start getting to a month, 3 weeks, something like that, which is what we were seeing 2021, 2022, stuff was just boom, 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 selling. It didn't matter what it was, it just sold. You couldn't even blink fast enough before it sold. Now, what'll happen is you'll see something similar, and instead of prices going down because you have more demand, if you have 10 to 15% increased demand, it'll probably offset the numbers in terms of supply and demand over the next 6 months, and then you'll see prices increase. Now, do I think prices are going to just zoom up in Chicago? No, we're not going to see the numbers like we did a few years ago. But if you start seeing prices drop too much, the problem is prices will probably go back up because people will start bidding because they think they have to get it before it goes back up. And then also at the same point, by the way, conversely, some people are going to keep waiting and never buy because they just say, oh, prices might go down again. And prices are never going to go down that far. And like I said, major events not included. So I've been kind of going through a few different ideas here in terms of price. I'd love to get someone's ideas, thoughts, opinions, just see what people are thinking, because I know that there are a few people here online. Some people are saying hi. I'm definitely curious about what I could do to talk to you about this. But, from my perspective, I could see that there might be a little price depreciation, which is something that's good for buyers, but I'm not sure if it's going to be the type of relief that they're looking for. What we really probably need in the long term is an increase in wages as well, because otherwise, if we have that disparity, because we're at all-time 40-year highs for wages versus home prices, 40-year high. It's insane. Because the last time it was this bad in terms of real estate prices, you're talking probably around the early 1980s when interest rates were 18%. So people just don't have the ability to pay for that now. So the best thing that we could do to help homeowners is to help make sure that they have higher wages, make sure there's growth, all those things that help the economy anyways, that we always need to be focusing on. I know that everyone wants to grow anyways, so it's not like we're saying something that's monumentally mind-blowing here. I don't think I changed anyone's opinion. Grow the economy, duh. But it is really important to know that the price to wage gap is really probably the biggest challenge that we're having right now. And that's really what I got from that previous video, and that's why I wanted to address this today. So I'm pretty much out of things to say for today, because I'm going through my list. I'm looking through. One last thing I do want to address: property taxes won't fall. Cook County doesn't work like that. So one of the things that's kind of funny is that people say, well, my prices have dropped, now my assessment should drop as well. Well, first of all, Cook County does a triannual assessment, and a lot of it they've done, especially for the city, was done last year. So good luck waiting for that to come around, because that'll be 2 to 3 years before you even see anything on there. The other part of that equation, though, is excuse me. The other part of that equation for property taxes is that the city always needs money, especially Chicago. Chicago needs money. They screwed up all the meters and everything else. They don't have enough cash. They will continuously look for cash. They're not going to lower property taxes and tax valuations just because houses are worth less. They're going to say, screw it, the homeowner has to pay. And that's really what's going to happen in the next few years, is that even though we think that we should get lower prices, we're probably going to have trouble with that. So just keep that in mind. With that said, this is Andy Nathan, Creative Smart Contractors. If you have questions about any of this and you're like, hey, what should I do? Should I buy? Should I rent? Should I wait? Should I invest now? I don't get it. How can we help fix this? Let's talk. Like I said, I'm a licensed real estate agent, licensed contractor. Love to find out how we can help you out. This is Andy Nathan coming to you here from Creative Smart Contractors. I appreciate everyone who's joined today. With that, have a great day and a better week. Thanks.